Hello, so in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can instantly create custom dashboards, not only for you, but for your clients, how you can easily rebuild them, and how you can also leverage component libraries that already have almost all the things that you want to build if you really want to get personal and really have some customization to what you want to build on top of VAPI. So I'm going to get right into this because this is a very short video. It shouldn't be too long. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to log into my VAPI account. And VAPI is a platform that allows you to create powerful voice assistants that can do a plethora of things. And as you create these voice assistants and have inbound, outbound, or web phone calls, you get a lot of data in a dashboard when you log in. Now, a lot of people who are leveraging VAPI are also agency owners who are basically selling these voice assistants to their clients. And they don't want their clients to know that they're using VAPI or whatever the case may be. And they want to know, how can I basically replicate this dashboard into something like this here? Now, this is not a perfect example, but this is just something really quick that I whipped up, and it didn't cost me a lot of money or any time. And I've been doing it day one since I've got started with VAPI. Now, let's get into visual databases just really quick. If you don't know what a visual database is, it's really not too different than a Google Sheet. Basically, visual databases are almost the same thing as Excel spreadsheets, but they allow you to transform, aggregate, and visualize your data very easily. These are kind of native features inside of visual database platforms. Now, the platform that I'm showcasing in this video is called AI Table. If you're not familiar with it, that's fine. You may be familiar with the platform called Airtable, and if you're not, it's still fine, whether you use them or not, but they are very easy examples of visual databases. Now, there's no problem with using Google Sheets, but through my years of automation, I found that it's something that's not scalable in terms of providing it to your clients, especially if you are already familiar with visual databases, because once again, there are just so many more features and things that you can do with visual databases. With that being said, let's get into tracking information from a call. I won't go into all the specifics, but basically VAPI sends us what is called a end of call report. And from this end of call report, we can get a plethora of data from a call. And I actually show an example of this. So I'm in an automation platform called Make. And actually what I'm going to do is go to a platform automation that I have called end of call report. And I'm just going to go to a recent call that I just did before this video. And I'm going to walk through this automation, which is very simple. And this is kind of the founding blocks to tracking automation. It doesn't have to be this specifically, because I do have one component here that if you are using VAPI, you may not be familiar with, and that's totally fine. That's this add user to VAPI database. I just noticed I spelled that wrong, which is fine. I'll touch on that briefly. But when you configure the end of call report to be sent to your server, you get a plethora of information, such as the time, how long the call lasted, the day of the call, the transcript, all the messages that were said, the customer phone number, and other things like that, why the call was ended. Now, recently, actually, VAPI just updated the end of call report to have a plethora of information. But what I like to do is actually use another API call, which is called get call information, which basically allows you to use the call ID of a specific call to pull all of the information, which might not be available in the end of call report, to pull that. And if you want to send that off, if there was more information you wanted to pull, you can send that off into your database. Now, this is step one. You should definitely have something like this tracked for multiple reasons. And I'll go into this database here of why. One, when you track all of the data from your calls, besides just the end of call report, you're going to get the cost of a call. You're going to get the cost of the speech to text provider, the text to speech provider, the large language model that you used. You're going to get these ended reasons. You're going to get the analysis, the transcript. All of these are important. And when you have all of this information, you're able to aggregate this information, move this information into separate categories, basically filter it at a very fine level to find the information that you want to use, whether it's for yourself, clients, or automations. As an example, this data sheet is tracking all of my calls. But if I only wanted to look at the inbound calls, I could do that. If I only wanted to look at the outbound calls, I could do that. If I only wanted to look at the web calls, I could do that. If I only wanted to look at the ended reasons, which is beyond important, I could do that. Not only for the voice assistants that I set up for my business, but for my client's business. If I don't have a way that I'm automating and tracking this, I won't be able to catch a problem before my client. And you should always be able to catch a problem before your client, if not the same time that your client may be sending in a ticket. And you also want to know when this problem arises, exactly what happened, or have the most amount of information that you can to quickly solve that problem. You can have automations or notifications deployed to a Slack or Discord or a text message to call you to let you know that these errors arise. But you're not going to redo this by constantly looking in your dashboard. And just with this spreadsheet, basically in this visual database, I'm able to do all of those things. Here's another view of this, basically of all the call summaries. Because when I run an automation, or basically I set up a voice assistant to be called, and a person is a client of my client's business, I want them to remember what the previous conversation was talked about. And because I'm tracking the call summaries, I'm able to use this in that automation and pull it. So, of course, the conversation is more dynamic and more like better for the person that's on the call, right? And I'm doing all of this here. Now, once again, from this data, I'm able to make widgets, which basically are charts, and I'm able to filter this data more and say, okay, how many calls were made today? How many calls were made this week? How many calls were made this month? And so forth and so on. And I can aggregate all of this to get all of these metrics here, once again, simply by this information coming in, and then I map this information here. So I get the end of call report. I wait a few seconds because you can't just instantly pull the information from a call. You have to wait a few seconds. So I wait about 10 seconds. I get the information from that call. And then this is an API endpoint that's not in the documentation. I'm not going to say it's not public, it's just not in the documentation. That adds a user person to VAPI's database. Basically gives them a UUID, and you can use this if basically you're tracking calls made to this person inside of a data sheet or wherever else. I'll show this later, but just to show what this looks like, a person will have their own UUID with a name and a number attached to them. And then I add this information. And every time after a call is made, and if call report comes, this information is then populated into my spreadsheet, which then goes into the chart that you just saw. And it's that simple. I now have a custom dashboard that I can then embed, or depending on the platform, or if I want my client, they can log into this platform, have their own folder that is segmented for them to see only this dashboard, and it's super easy. Now, really quick, I want to touch on rebilling. One quick and simple, easy way that's definitely overlooked. Once again, if you're tracking all of this data, right? If I come back to just looking at all these calls, if I have the cost of these calls, right? And I'm marking this up, no matter what percentage this is, I can then just create another field that's a formula that has the marked up price, which then I can display to my client in whichever way I want, depending on marking up the cost depending on whether I'm billing them based on minutes or whatever the case may be. I can then create formulas around this data, mark up that price, whether it's to the cost of the time, and then rebuild them. And because all this information is coming in, I don't have to use something like Stripe metered billing, even though that is wonderful and those are still options. But I don't have to go through all that technical setup because I'm displaying all of this information here. Now, believe it or not, that's how you can easily and quickly use a visual database to basically create custom dashboards and do all these other things. Now, really quick, if you are using Google, you still can use Google. No problem. You can use whatever you want. There are other platforms out there that exist, such as Softer, which basically is a platform that allows you to create apps and dashboards and other things like that based off data you already have from platforms like Airtable or HubSpot or Google Sheets or SmartSuite or whatever the case may be. So if you are using Google or Airtable and you don't like the options that are there or there are no options, you can also come here to a platform like Softer that already basically has everything you need to build a dashboard and then just import that data inside of there. And if you're a little more savvy, you can leverage what are called component libraries. Here's a very popular component library that a plethora of SaaS platforms use. And basically, all of these components are already built. You can just take the code and plug them in wherever you're building and then import that data inside of there. So as an example, I'm just going to come to all of these charts here. And these are a plethora of charts where you can change all the colors. You can do a plethora of things. Here's the code. And of course, if you don't know how to do this, you can go pay somebody, give them all these resources, and then they can create whatever it is that you need to create. And you don't have to worry about paying more money because they have to develop all these things from scratch, because you can just go leverage a component library with all of these things here. Now, what's really cool, and the reason why I'm showing these things, because this was my exact use case, not that I didn't want to go build something custom, but because AI Table is a very powerful platform that allows me to already build widgets. And if I come here, I'm not going to import a widget. If I come here to a new widget, right? I can make a chart, I can make pivot tables, I can make funnels. I can already turn this data into almost anything I want visually. And if these options aren't here, AI Table actually allows me the option to make custom widgets using code. And what did I just say that this component library was? A whole library full of code that I can use to make my custom widget. And then I can just come put this back in here in AI Table. And voila. Just very cool stuff. And once again, I'm not saying you can't go make something custom and from scratch, but if you really want to get started really fast, which you can, and these visual databases are very inexpensive. They cost about $20 to $50 a month. Plus, you can just have your clients pay for what you'd be paying anyway. You can get started really, really fast. Now, before I end this video, we're going to show you a really cool way that you can build a custom dashboard if you already have a lot of data and you weren't tracking all of the calls or only just tracking the end of call report. That's what a simple automation like this here. And before I actually show this automation, I need to actually come here to this little thing and talk about the VAPI API and just a small introduction of how you can use these in different environments to do a lot of cool things. Now, I do have to come here to the API documentation, and I do have a video coming up on this. For the last 10 months, I've been using VAPI, about 6 months. I've been getting a lot of requests about making an API video because I only use the APIs for VAPI, which this small demonstration, you'll see why, because you're able to do a lot of powerful things, and I don't have to be inside of the VAPI interface, or I don't have to log in VAPI. So when you come here to this API reference, you're going to see a lot of APIs here, but we're only going to focus on two. And these two are in the calls category. This is the list calls API, and this is the get call API. Now, list calls basically will list the calls inside of your account. When you make this API call, and if you don't basically put any adjustments on it, it's going to pull the last 100 calls from your account. If you do want to specify more calls, you can just change the number, the limit. You can add the assistant ID. You can pull only the calls for the assistant ID. You can pull the calls only created at a certain time of the month or week or whatever the case may be. You have a lot of options. But what I'm going to do is just pull the last 100 calls from my account. And from this, there is basically a plethora of information. And when I was kind of building this automation, because I had a lot of people coming to me who, once again, already had a lot of data, but they weren't tracking all of this data and they wanted to build a demo dashboard, basically. So walking through this, we look at the APIs and we say, okay, well, we can get all of the calls from our account, but it might not be all of the information that we want, right? Let's just say this. And I think this was the case as I was building this at the time. All of the information doesn't come here. But the most important thing that we always get is, oh, I'm sorry about that. The most important thing that we always get is the call ID. So from getting this call ID, we can basically pull all the information from our call, which is very similar to this automation here, right? Because from the end of call report, VAPI always sends us in our call object, they always send us our ID. Even if it isn't the end of call report, we always get our call ID. So with this for an automation, I use that call ID inside of here. I just map it so every time it's changed, that automation runs, right? So we've ran the get call, and what we're going to do is get all the IDs, and then what we're going to do is actually uh, we list all the calls, right? And then we're going to get the calls because we have that specific ID, right? If I come back here, um, this is just a regular API call, right? This is actually with the call because I'm listing the calls. I'm sorry, I just did a little fast forward. So I'm listing the calls here, right? And then I put a limit here because to show an example, if I don't put a limit, once again, it's going to default 100. But if I do put a limit, because this is a query parameter, we see this now pop up in this limit right here. And when dealing with query parameters in Make, you just come right here to a query string, and then you add that. And when you make that API call, you'll get a response. And this is a lot of data. I did 500 because I think if I do any more, it's going to mess up. But just to show an example, yeah, I'm pulling all of this here. And then what I did was at that time, I had put these in a Google spreadsheet. And then basically this spreadsheet, I think it's this one here, right? This spreadsheet only has the call IDs, right? Now from this spreadsheet that only has the call IDs, let's do this from scratch. This spreadsheet that only has the call IDs, right? It'll load all of these call IDs. If I come here to the output and I scroll down, basically I'll see like 1,000 calls in here, and I'll show you how I got to that number in a minute. And basically it will go through all of those call IDs. And once again, we're going to get the call with our ID and then update that information and send it into our AI table. Now, how you can make an estimate on how many calls you have in your account is that we now updated the call log to reflect how the API works. So it'll display 100 calls here. What you can do is just go down to the last number in this page and then multiply that by 100. So I'm not going to go to all my pages because I think I have about 67. So I would just do 67 pages times 100, and that would basically give me close or the exact amount of how many calls that I had. And then that's what you would put in this number here to populate all your call IDs. Now, after that, you can have an automation that says, hey, all my calls IDs are in the spreadsheet. I'm going to, because this is a long list, go through that long list, make that long list into basically bundles, and then update that. So if I actually ran this, this would run, and then this would start updating this spreadsheet here, right? And from this spreadsheet being updated, my dashboard is going to be being updated and being made in real time, correct? Now, one thing I will say with an automation like this, going back to what I said earlier, is that there's a lot of information that comes in, and just simply for debugging reasons, like the ended reasons for VAPI, there are 123 reasons. So you actually have to have this information already added. So when it comes in, right, it automatically fills. And like I said, from all of these ended call reasons, I could then make an automation that says, hey, when a record matches this filter, so when a record matches this condition, the condition would be ended reasons is, and I would have to, I've already done this is in a different data sheet, but I would put all these ended reasons here. And when this ended reason matched whatever it was, I would then send a webhook or send a message to Slack to notify me instantaneously, right? So this dashboard is being built with that automation, and you would just run it until it ended. Now, I'm going to stop this because obviously I'm not going to run all those calls right now, regardless of cost, even though that is what I'm going to get into next. But cost is very important because if you have a lot of calls or you're doing this to clients, that can add up. Now, granted, you should already be tracking all your calls because this isn't something you would normally do, right? This isn't an automation that I'm saying do after. No. First, remember to track all your calls. But in the event that you weren't tracking all the information from your calls or whatever the case may be, then you can create an automation like this to pull all that information and then put it inside of wherever you want it to be. Now, I'm going to show you something really cool about APIs. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this same automation here, right? With just 2 clicks of a button, I'm going to pull in all the calls into my visual database. Then I'm going to update all those calls, which is still going to create my dashboard. And the way I'm going to do that is with JavaScript. Now, really quick, I know a lot of people don't like code, and definitely code can be quite irritating, but we are definitely at a time where you can take some code, not know any of it, throw it in ChatGPT, and it's going to help you a lot. Now, one way that you can know a platform is really great with their APIs and you can build on top of them is if they give you those APIs in a plethora of different coding languages. And VAPI does that. If you ever notice to the side here, there's a different coding languages basically showing you how to make those API calls. Now, one thing that's really cool about visual databases is that they all use JavaScript. Basically, JavaScript is like, think of it, you go to a website, you click a button, in the background, JavaScript is running to make an API call. And I'm going to show you how you can do that in visual databases and basically build your dashboard for free and not use up all of your operations instead. So inside of AI table, I basically have 2 widgets, which are JavaScript, which have the VAPI API inside to do 2 things. One is to pull all of the call IDs once again from my account using the first API here, list calls. And then after that, we're going to get all the calls and then update that as well. So I'm going to refresh this page. We're going to press run right here. This is going to pull in all those calls. You're going to see 100 calls basically come here. Right, I can come back to my call dashboard. Obviously, there'll be no information here. And then now we're just going to update those calls. And now all of this information is going to come in. Not using any third-party platforms. This is all happening within my visual database. And of course, my dashboard is going to be being built in real time while those API calls are happening. And that's just really amazing and really cool. Now, one thing I remembered that I want to touch on, and I'll go into this in the next videos that I'll create, is that a lot of people may be asking why there's no name and phone number here. Well, one thing is that this is a web call, so you don't get that information natively. And it's actually hard to say natively because what you actually can do, and I'll show this in this end of call report, is that in VAPI with your assistant, there's two ways where you can extract information. You can extract information from your summary, your analysis, or you can extract information from a tool call, right? So a tool call, you would you would be like booking an appointment, and you would get the name and all that information and all those things, right? And then you can map that data. But also, even if you don't have a tool call, or even if you don't map the data from a tool call, you can still pull in that information. So as an example here, I'm going to come to the analysis tab. I have a very simple prompt from in the structured data that says, hey, extract the following information: the person's name and the person's phone number. And then I made a data schema to pull that information from. So as an example, in this end of call report, if I come here, gonna wait for this to load really quick. Inside of my analysis, I have structured data, and here's name and here's number. And this is not from a tool call or anything. This is just from basically making a prompt that says, hey, read all this information, and from that, extract this. So I always have this no matter what, whether it was a tool call, whether I had the ID from VAPI that I made and from the API, whatever the case may be. I thought this is, I want to say this is a cool trick, but something that can be easily overlooked if you always want to pull that information from the end of a call. So I hope this video was very useful. I have a API video coming up very soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave any comments. I also have a consultation link where I consult with agency owners who need help with implementing things inside of their agency that are using voice assistants, especially with VAPI. And also, I'm going to be having a VAPI cohort that will be about 3 to 4 weeks, which will be really, really great in helping people get started with VAPI for inbound, outbound, and web. So I hope this was a very helpful video. Until then, have a wonderful day.